When I was a youth, I was actually in the lodge. That's Marnock Lodge in Akron, Ohio. I had been voted in as the chapter chief and was also on the ceremonial team. And my dad was on the trail committee. He was one of the chairmen for the OA Trail, and they were working on that. Well, they would make trail passes from time to time, and he would come home. A lot of times, I wouldn't be at camp when he was, and he'd come home and he'd bring me a patch, and I get it, a back patch, a trail patch, or something like that. Occasionally, a lodge patch. And that's how I kept accumulating. Then I went to college, and he continued on several years with the trail committee. And when I come home, he'd have several envelopes with patches, and I just put in my foot locker. And they kind of stayed there, and I became a scoutmaster in my 20s. And then I pulled them all out and started looking at them. I thought, well, you know what? I'd like to keep doing this. So that's how I began. Moved to North Carolina, and then some guy drilled me into Catawba, and I started collecting Catawba. So that's kind of where I'm at. Experienced collectors. You had either a few lodges or a few different items. I thought I'd never met anyone with just collected knots before. I thought that was excellent. But sometimes after we collect for a while, there's just a few things that we need. Very hard to get. We look and look, but we get it slows down. We also have a situation where we have boys come into scouting, and even adults that come in with their sons in their 30s and 40s. And we need to, if our hobby is going to continue to grow, we need to maybe reach out a little bit and encourage them and talk about collecting. If I were starting out and I was to look at all of Catawba or Okanichi or Marnock now, it is such a vast thing. I would have to think about whether or not I really wanted to collect those lodges or do any collecting at all. We need to be able to reach out and help others to learn how to collect and what to collect. And there's no rule that says that we must have every patch from every scouting segment. In other words, if we collect scouting as CSPs, there's no rule that says we just have to collect scouting CSP. We can collect other things. For example, we could collect, if we go to a conclave, we could collect one flap from every lodge that attended conclave. It doesn't have to be the biggest patch or the most expensive, but we could collect one from each one. I, for example, have 3 World Jamboree collections. I never intended to collect the World Jamboree, much less all of them or one of them or whatever. However, when I came to Charlotte, I ended up being a scoutmaster here, and the scoutmaster closest to me and I started to become friends. He went to the World Jamboree in Australia. And so when he came back, called me over to his house and we sat down, and he handed me several patches from the Australian World Jamboree. And so I started keeping an eye out and collecting those. And that was just a nice little sideline. Again, I didn't want to collect them all, but I liked them. In 1971, the World Jamboree was in Japan, and I have another friend who's still active in scouting, and he attended that event. He had gotten duplicates when he was there, and now he was much older. And we were talking one day, and he brought me a bag with all these great duplicates from the 1971, and it got me to start collecting that particular National Jamboree. And then in 2007, I attended the World Jamboree in England, started collecting a lot of things while I was there, but also after I came back. All 3 of these cases, my collecting for those collections started with friendship and companionship. In 2007, one of my best friends and I and my son went to England to that jamboree. That's important. I know that wood badge people often collect an animal, but what animal? An animal that from the patch is from a new friend. So maybe you would share patch with someone who happened to be a bear, but it's not a bear patch they get. Might get them going into collecting patches. I began collecting with just a few patches from the lodge and council. And one of my newest beginnings are going to be a very small collection. These are flats actually that have a hog or a pig on them. Okay. And if you look at these hogs on there, these hogs have an attitude, just like many of the members of that particular lodge, but I like them all. They're really nice, both the members of the lodge and the patches. I have a fun question for you. What is your favorite flap?
Mine's a Canalino S1. I'm just saying.
Is that it?
Pretty flap.
I'll chime in. Mine's probably My Malibu S1.
347 F1 with the cross on it.
So like Mike Lahik and the F2.
I'll share mine. My favorite patch, my dad was one of the chairmen I told you on the trail committee, and they came out with a patch, their first patch, and they made three of them. There were three prototypes, so to speak, with a certain design. They decided not to use that particular patch as the patch from the lot or for the trail. However, they gave one of them to my dad, and the other two went to the two other people, the chair people that were in charge of other parts of the trail committee. When I turned 40 years old, my dad presented that particular patch to me, so I would have that in my collection. And that has to be my favorite, a personal connection.
So how come you don't share that you're a World Jamboree collector? I never knew.
I only collect those three jamborees, nothing else.
Now, do you collect like all the contingent patches from the Jamboree, or do you just kind of collect a couple of the U.S. things, or what?
I always try to do the U.S. things and then the things that country produces. But sometimes I'll just see a patch, like, oh, I got to have that. So I get that, and it's surprising people have seen it. You know what? I got something you'd like, and they'll bring me another one. So it's been kind of great having those three.